Leke Adeyanju had spent years crafting the perfect life. A loving wife, a brilliant son, a reputation that commanded respect. But perfection is a fragile thing, and on a warm Thursday evening, his past knocked on his door demanding to be let in. It started with a phone call. He was in his office reviewing contracts when his phone vibrated. Unknown number. He ignored it. Then again and again. By the fifth call, he picked up, irritated. Hello? A pause. Then a voice he had long forgotten. Lek. His stomach twisted. Sad, his fingers tightened around the phone. His eyes darted to the office door, as if she might walk in. Why are you calling me? He whispered, low and bitter. You thought you could erase me? Leke shut his eyes. Sade, whatever this is. I lost the baby. Her voice cut through him. I begged you, Lek. I called. I came to your office. You ignored me, and I lost the baby, alone. Lek exhaled sharply. I'm sorry. Sorry? Another laugh, this one colder. You get to be sorry. I get to bleed in a hospital no one should ever step foot in. Sade, what do you want? Silence. Then I want what you have. Leke's pulse pounded. What does that mean? She didn't answer. The line went dead. He sat there gripping the phone, his mind racing. He had buried this. He had made sure. Sade was gone. The past was gone. But now it was back. And this time it wasn't going anywhere. Lek saw her before she saw him. She was leaning against his car, dressed in a simple blouse and jeans. But there was nothing simple about the way she stood. Calm, confident, waiting. The security men at his office gate had seen her too, but something in her eyes kept them from asking questions. His first instinct was to turn back, to hide. Instead, he walked up to her, keeping his face blank. What do you want, Sai? She smiled, slow and knowing. I already told you. Sai, listen. She raised a hand, cutting him off. Let's not waste time. You will take me into your house. You will introduce me to your wife as a distant cousin looking for work. You will let me stay. Lek's stomach clenched. You're insane. Sade tilted her head. Am I? You think BC won't believe me if I send her everything? Screenshots, hotel receipts, old messages? You think she won't put the pieces together? Leke took a shaky breath. If you do that, I'll tell her you're lying. Sade's smile widened. You don't understand, do you? I don't need her to believe me completely. I just need to plant doubt. A woman like BC, doubt will eat her alive. Leke clenched his fists. He had built his marriage on trust. If that trust cracked just a little, it would all collapse. What you really want? He asked, his voice tight. She leaned closer. To watch you squirm. Leke closed his eyes. The past wasn't just back, it was here to stay. 2 days later, Sade stood in his living room, smiling sweetly as BC welcomed her with open arms. Leke didn't tell me he had such a lovely cousin, BC said, beaming. Sade turned to Leke, her eyes dancing with amusement. He had made his deal with the devil, and the devil was now inside his house. Sade settled into the house like she had always belonged. She moved lightly, never overstepping, never doing anything to raise suspicion. She was helpful, respectful, always eager to please. Within days, BC adored her. She's such a blessing, BC told Lek one night as they lay in bed. She works so hard, even Toby likes her. Lek's jaw tightened. Toby, he had noticed it too, the way Sade paid extra attention to their son. She laughed at his jokes, ruffled his hair, made his favorite meals. Small things, harmless things. But something about it felt off. One evening, Leke walked into the living room and found Sade and Toby sitting too close on the couch. She was whispering something to him, and he was listening, his brows furrowed. Leke's voice was sharp. Toby, go to your room. Toby jumped up and hurried away. Sade turned to Lek, unbothered. That was rude. Leke stepped closer, lowering his voice. I don't know what game you're playing, but stay away from my son. Sade smiled. Or what? His hands curled into fists. He couldn't throw her out. BC would ask questions, and Sade knew it. She stood and walked past him, pausing at the door. Relax, Lek, she murmured. I'm just getting started. That night, Leke barely slept. Over the next few weeks, Toby changed. He stopped talking as much. He spent more time alone. His usual brightness dimmed. One night, BC sighed. I think Toby is going through a phase. Leke nodded stiffly. He wanted to believe that. He wanted to believe this was something normal, something harmless. But deep down, he knew the truth. Sade was winning, and he was running out of time. Leke had always believed that if he ignored a problem long enough, it would go away. But some problems festered. One night as he passed Toby's room, he heard whispers. He paused, his hand tightening on the doorknob. Sade's voice, soft, careful. You know you can always talk to me, right? Silence. Then Toby's voice, low, uncertain. But what if my dad gets angry? Leki's pulse roared in his ears. He didn't push the door open, he couldn't. Instead, he walked away. That night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His son was slipping away, and he was too much of a coward to stop it. Then came the night everything shattered. They were at the dinner table. Bisi had made ogbono soup, but Toby wasn't eating. He sat staring at his bowl, quiet. Bisi touched his arm. Toby, my love, what is it? Leki expected silence. Instead, Toby spoke, and every word that left his mouth dragged the air from the room. Bisi's spoon clattered to the floor. Her breathing turned ragged. Her hands shook. Leki couldn't move. He couldn't speak. Toby had told everything. Everything. Bisi turned to Leki, her eyes burning with betrayal. How did she get into this house, Leki? Silence. How did she get into this house? Leki opened his mouth, but no words came. He had done this. He had let this happen. And now there was no way to undo it. Bisi stood abruptly. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She picked up her phone. The police arrived an hour later. Sade didn't resist. As they dragged her away, she turned to Lek and smiled. A slow, knowing smile. Now we're even. Then she was gone. But the damage remained. And Leki knew he had lost more than just a battle. He had lost everything. Leki sat in the living room, staring at nothing. The house was quiet, too quiet. Just hours ago, the police had dragged Sade away, but her presence still lingered, thick and suffocating. Bisi stood in front of him, her hands shaking. Say it, Leki. He looked up slowly. Say what? His voice was hoarse. Say what you did. Her eyes were red, her breath unsteady. You brought her here. You let her into our home. You gave her access to our son. Lek swallowed hard. His throat burned. Bisi clenched her fists. Do you know what she did to Toby? The words felt like knives in the air. Toby sat on the couch, knees drawn to his chest, his eyes dull. He hadn't spoken since the police left. Bisi knelt in front of him, cupping his face. My baby, she whispered. Tell Daddy what you told me. Leki wanted to stop this. He wanted to cover his ears, to make it all disappear. But then, in a small, broken voice, Toby spoke. She made me do things. His voice wavered. She said it was our secret, that if I told, you wouldn't love me anymore. Leki's body went numb. Bisi let out a strangled cry, holding her son close. Toby flinched. He was scared of being touched. Leki covered his mouth with his hands, bile rising in his throat. This wasn't just a mistake. This was destruction. Bisi stood suddenly, wiping her tears. I'm leaving. Leki blinked. What? I'm leaving, she repeated. I'm taking my son, and we're never coming back. Leki shot to his feet. Bisi, please. She stepped back. Don't. Just don't. She turned to Toby. Go pack your things, baby. Toby stood and left the room without looking at Leki. A few minutes later, Bisi picked up the bags and walked toward the door. She paused just once. I gave you everything, Leki. Her voice cracked. And you gave us to a monster. Then she walked out. Leki didn't chase her. He sank onto the couch, staring at the empty doorway. The house felt colder, darker. Sade was gone. Bisi was gone. Toby was gone. And all that remained was the ruin.